My stepson, Alex, had always avoided me. It wasn't an outright rejection or something as dramatic as slamming doors or shouting. It was quieter than that. Subtler, like an invisible wall had slowly built up between us. Brick by brick. It wasn't something I could pinpoint, not at first. A glance here, a shift of the shoulders there, and the faintest sigh when I spoke. As if I had unknowingly crossed some unspoken line that neither of us could understand. I told myself that it was just the awkwardness of blending families. He was a teenager, after all, and teenagers were complicated. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the feeling that it was more than just growing pains. We had been living together for 3 years. I had married his father when Alex was only 12, and he was now 15. In those years, I had done everything I could to be the best stepmother I could be. But I always felt like I was walking on eggshells. It wasn't that Alex was a difficult child, far from it, that he had this way of retreating into himself, shutting everyone out. He was quiet, withdrawn, and often left the room the moment I entered. At first, I thought it was because of his natural teenage desire for privacy. But over time, it became apparent that my presence in the house seemed to unsettle him more than it should. Whenever I spoke to him, he gave short, polite answers, never really engaging. If I asked him about his day, he would nod or give a one-word response and retreat into his room. If I tried to make conversation at the dinner table, he would quietly pick at his food, eyes fixed on the plate as if the walls of the house could somehow shield him from the conversation. I tried to brush it off as typical teenage behavior, but the more I tried to make an effort, the more it seemed like he was pushing me away. At first, I didn't take it personally. After all, his mother wasn't in the picture. His father and I had talked about the difficulties of raising a teenager who had lost one parent, and it was clear that Alex had emotional baggage from that. I told myself it was only natural for him to be distant, but months turned into years and nothing changed. In fact, it only seemed to get worse. He was becoming more closed off, more distant. The discomfort in our interactions was starting to bleed into the rest of the family. My husband, Tom, didn't see it at first. He was so caught up in work and his own life that he didn't notice the small things. The way Alex would always find a way to avoid sitting near me at family meals, or how his conversations with Tom always seemed to occur behind closed doors, as if Alex was keeping me out. I tried to talk to Tom about it, but he just shrugged it off, assuming it was something Alex would grow out of. But I wasn't so sure. It felt like there was a deeper issue, something Alex wasn't telling anyone. I tried everything. I tried offering help when he seemed down, suggesting we do something together, just the two of us. Maybe we could go see a movie, or grab some ice cream. But every attempt was met with a shrug or an excuse. I'm busy, or I'd rather be alone. His coldness didn't just sting, it left me feeling invisible, like I was nothing more than a shadow in my own home. I couldn't help but wonder if I had done something wrong, if I had said something that made him uncomfortable. But every time I tried to approach the subject, Alex would deflect. He'd change the topic or simply retreat to his room. I was left with a gnawing feeling in my gut that I couldn't shake. Them. One particularly rainy evening, something changed. I had been sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard the door slam. The heavy thud of boots echoed through the hallway, followed by the sound of wet footsteps. I glanced up to see Alex standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone, his backpack dripping water onto the hardwood floor. His face was drawn, pale and tired. He didn't even look at me. Without a word, he kicked off his boots and headed toward the stairs. I couldn't help but notice how he avoided looking in my direction, how he purposely kept his head down. "Alex?" I called softly. He didn't respond. I felt a pang of frustration mixed with worry. He had always been distant, but tonight, There was something different in his demeanor. His body language was tense, as though every part of him was coiled with something unspoken. Something heavy hung in the air, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I stood up and walked toward him, trying to bridge the gap that had been widening between us. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. Alex's eyes flicked toward me for a moment, but there was no warmth in them. They were distant, colder than usual. He opened his mouth to say something, but then closed it again, turning his gaze away from me. He didn't answer. "You've been quiet all day," I continued, trying not to push too hard. "Is everything all right?" He shook his head, a barely audible sigh escaping his lips, and I felt a wave of frustration rise inside me. I knew he was hiding something, there was no mistaking that. But what? What was so bad that he couldn't talk to me about it? "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice flat, emotionless. Then he started to climb the stairs without looking back. "Alex," I called after him, but he didn't respond. He just disappeared upstairs, retreating into his sanctuary like he always did when something was bothering him. But tonight, something was different. I could feel it in my bones. There was an urgency in the air that I couldn't ignore. I stood there for a moment, staring at the stairs, my heart racing. The house felt too quiet. The rain against the windows sounded louder than usual, as if nature itself was amplifying the unease in my chest. I had learned over the years to respect his space, to give him the privacy he craved. But tonight, something in me snapped. I couldn't let it go. Whatever was bothering Alex, I had to know. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. After a few moments of hesitation, I walked upstairs, my feet heavy with each step. When I reached his door, I paused. I could hear the faint sound of him moving inside, probably pacing or fidgeting. I knocked softly, then waited. There was no immediate response, but I could hear the shuffle of feet on the other side. After a moment, the door cracked open just a sliver. His eyes, tired and distant, peeked out from the darkness of his room. "What's wrong?" I asked again, my voice softer this time. "I'm not trying to pry, Alex, but I know something's wrong. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but I need you to know that I'm here. You don't have to face whatever it is alone." He didn't answer. He just stood there for a long moment, staring at me, his eyes shifting with some emotion I couldn't quite place. Fear, confusion, maybe even shame. Then, finally, he opened the door wide enough for me to step inside. I walked in slowly, taking in the dimly lit room. The walls were plastered with posters, some of them old, others new, a mixture of his interests over the years. His bed was messy, his desk covered with textbooks and papers, but there was something unsettling about the stillness in the room. It was as if the air had thickened with something unspoken. Alex didn't sit on his bed or ask me to sit down. He just stood there, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his eyes locked on the floor. I could tell he was fighting something, but whatever it was, he didn't want to let me in. "I know something's wrong, Alex," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can tell me anything. I won't judge you, but you need to let me help." His eyes flicked up to mine, and I saw a flash of something, fear, or maybe guilt. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. I can't talk about it," he said, his words thick with emotion. My heart clenched. I wanted to press him, to demand answers, but I could see the pain in his eyes. He wasn't ready to share. And yet, I knew that whatever was tormenting him was bigger than he could handle on his own. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "Okay," I said softly. "I won't push you, But please remember, I'm here for you. Whenever you're ready, we can talk. You're not alone." Alex didn't respond. He just nodded, his face unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned back to the window, staring out into the night, his body stiff with tension. I knew that the conversation wasn't over, but for now, it would have to be Dot as I left his room. I felt an unsettling heaviness settle in my chest. Something wasn't right, something was about to break. But I had no idea just how far this silence would stretch. It was a restless night. I tried to go to sleep, but the events of the evening kept replaying in my mind: Alex's strange behavior, the coldness in his eyes, the way he had withdrawn into himself once again. It wasn't just typical teenage aloofness anymore. It felt like a wall had been built between us, thick and impenetrable. Something had changed, and whatever it was too heavy for him to carry alone. But I knew I had to respect his space. I told myself that he would open up when he was ready. After all, I didn't want to push him further away. I had been through the teen years myself, and I knew how hard it could be to share your thoughts, especially when you were carrying something that felt too big for anyone else to understand. But despite my best efforts to convince myself that time would heal whatever was troubling him, the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. This wasn't just typical teenage angst. No, there was something deeper, darker beneath the surface. I spent the next few days trying to act as normal as possible. I went about my usual routine, keeping busy, talking to Tom about work and family matters, pretending everything was fine. But I couldn't ignore the small signs that something was wrong. Every time I passed Alex in the hallway, he would quickly look away. He would avoid sitting near me during meals, always choosing a seat on the other side of the table. His conversations with Tom were quieter, more guarded, as though he was trying to keep something from me, something important. I tried again that weekend to sit down and talk with him, but he was distant, barely making eye contact and giving short, monosyllabic answers. He seemed irritated by my attempts, and I could tell that whatever he was hiding was making him angry, even if he didn't say it out loud. I didn't want to make him feel cornered, so I backed off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking on a tightrope, afraid that one wrong step would make him shut down completely. Then came the storm. It started out as just another rainy evening, but the dark clouds hanging low in the sky seemed to mirror the weight in the air inside our house. Tom had gone out to meet some friends, leaving just me and Alex at home. I was preparing dinner when I heard the unmistakable sound of Alex's footsteps coming down the stairs. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see him wander into the living room, but instead, he just stood in the doorway, silently watching me. "Alex," I said, trying to break the silence. He didn't respond at first. Instead, he just stood there, his posture stiff, arms folded across his chest as though he was bracing himself for something. His eyes were intense, though there was a flicker of something underneath the same uncertainty that had been building between us for weeks. Something was on the verge of coming to light. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, he spoke. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat, and the words I had been waiting to hear for so long hung in the air between us. This was the moment I realized. The moment when the barrier between us would finally break, when I would learn the truth. But as I looked into his eyes, I felt a shiver of unease. Whatever Alex had to say, it wasn't going to be easy. I set down the spatula I had been holding and turned toward him fully. "What is it, Alex? You know you can talk to me." He hesitated for a moment, his gaze shifting nervously, his jaw clenched and his shoulders tensed, as though every word he was about to say required a tremendous amount of strength. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. It's about someone I know. Someone I've been hanging out with recently. I felt a rush of confusion. Someone you've been hanging out with, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. Who? He was silent again for a long moment, and I could see the internal struggle written on his face. It was as though he was fighting against a flood of emotions, trying to decide whether to let me in or keep everything hidden. I waited, giving him space, hoping he would open up. The person, Alex continued slowly, is... I don't know what to make of it. I didn't think it was a big deal at first, but now I think it is. And I don't know who to trust anymore. I took a step closer, my heart racing. Alex, who is it? What happened? His eyes flicked to the floor. I don't think I can explain it all, but I think someone's been following me, watching me. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? Following you? Who? Alex took a deep breath, looking like he was about to crack under the weight of his words. It's hard to explain. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. But now, it's like they know where I am all the time. They show up at the same places I go. They know my routine. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was no longer just a normal teenage phase. This was something far more serious, something I wasn't prepared for. Are you saying someone's stalking you? He nodded, his face pale. I don't know if they're just watching me, or if they're trying to mess with me, but it's starting to feel like it's getting worse. Every time I turn around, I feel like I'm being followed, like someone's lurking around the corner. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. A wave of panic surged in my chest. This was not the simple miscommunication I had feared. This was something far darker, something that was beginning to take root in Alex's life. And I had no idea how to help him. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Why didn't you say anything? I didn't want to worry you, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I thought it would stop. I thought it was just in my head, but it's not. I stood there for a moment, processing what he had just revealed. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts. You could be doing this. Why Alex? What was their motive? And most importantly, how could I keep him safe? I walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing by telling me now, Alex. We'll figure this out, I promise. You're not alone in this. For the first time in a long time, Alex looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Relief. It was small, fleeting, but it was there. As though, in that moment, he finally felt that he wasn't carrying this burden by himself. I don't know who to trust, Alex whispered, his voice breaking. I don't know who's doing this or why. I pulled him into a tight hug, feeling the tension in his body slowly ease as he leaned into me. Whatever was happening, whatever Alex had been hiding, I knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. We were about to dive into something deeper than either of us had anticipated, and there was no turning back now. I'll help you figure it out, I said softly. But you have to promise me something. If you ever feel scared, if you ever feel like you're in danger, you come to me. No more secrets, okay? Alex nodded against my shoulder, his voice muffled. Okay, but deep down, I knew this was far from over. Whatever had started as a quiet unease had escalated into something much more dangerous. The truth was out now, but the answers were still out of reach. And I couldn't shake the feeling that what Alex had just revealed was only the tip of the iceberg. Something darker, something more sinister, was lurking just beneath the surface. The storm outside raged on, but inside, I felt a sense of dread, building in the pit of my stomach. Whatever Alex was caught up in, it was far worse than either of us had imagined. And I couldn't help but wonder if we had just stepped into something that we couldn't escape. Ask ChatGPT. I hadn't slept that night. The rain had kept me awake, pounding against the windows as if the storm outside was trying to shake me awake from a nightmare I couldn't escape. Alex had finally opened up to me, revealing the terrifying truth that someone had been following him, watching his every move. I had tried to reassure him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but deep down, I was terrified. I didn't know who was stalking him or why, and I didn't know how to protect him. We were both trapped in this web of uncertainty, caught in a situation that felt far too dangerous for me to fully grasp. By the time the morning light filtered through the curtains, I was already up, trying to piece together a plan. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I couldn't let Alex face this alone. I had to take action. I had spent years working in law enforcement before I became a stay-at-home mom, so I wasn't without resources. I knew how to navigate the systems that could help us, but I also knew how much red tape there was, how much time it would take to get real answers. We couldn't afford to wait. The next morning, I told Alex we were going to the police station. He was reluctant at first, as expected, but I told him we had to do it. This was no longer something we could ignore. I told him I would be right beside him the entire time, and that it was important to take these things seriously. Reluctantly, he agreed. As we drove to the station, the silence between us was suffocating. I could feel the tension in the car, thick and uncomfortable. Alex stared out the window, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. I could tell he was scared, more scared than he had been the night before. And it tore me apart to see him like that. This wasn't the confident, independent teenager I was used to. This was a frightened boy, struggling to make sense of something terrifying that he couldn't control. When we arrived at the police station, I noticed a subtle shift in Alex's posture. He straightened up, pushing his shoulders back as though he were trying to brace himself for what was to come. I could see the flicker of determination in his eyes, but it was mixed with uncertainty. He wasn't sure if this was the right step, or if it would even make a difference. But I could tell he was willing to try. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't shutting me out. We entered the station and went up to the front desk. The officer behind the counter greeted us with a friendly, professional smile, but I could see the subtle shift in his demeanor when he saw Alex's tense face. Something about the way Alex stood there, quiet and withdrawn, sent a signal to the officer that this wasn't just a simple case. "How can I help you today?" the officer asked, his voice calm and professional. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "My stepson has been followed by someone, and we need to report it." The officer raised an eyebrow, but his tone remained polite. "Has this person made direct contact with him?" I glanced at Alex, who shook his head. "No," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "They just watch me. Everywhere I go. They know my schedule. They show up at places I frequent." The officer looked between us, his gaze flicking back and forth between me and Alex. "This is serious. You did the right thing by coming in." I could see Alex's chest rise and fall with shallow breaths, his anxiety escalating. The officer turned and motioned for us to follow him down a hallway. "Let's get you to a detective. We'll start by taking down the details." As we followed the officer, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Alex had been carrying this burden on his own for so long, and I had been so caught up in trying to give him space that I hadn't seen how deep this fear ran. He wasn't just dealing with a stalker, he was dealing with something much darker, and I had failed to recognize the signs sooner. We entered a small, quiet room with a single desk and a pair of chairs. The officer gestured for us to sit, and we did. Alex sitting slightly away from me, as if he needed to create some distance. The detective who came in was a tall man in his late 40s, with graying hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. His badge gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights as he sat down across from us. "All right, Alex, I'm Detective Hayes. Tell me exactly. What's been going on?" he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Alex shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, but he nodded. "It started a few weeks ago," he began, his voice low. "At first, it was just a feeling like someone was watching me. But then I started noticing the same person around town. I'd see them in the coffee shop, at the park, in the grocery store. They never said anything to me, but I felt like they were always there, always looking at me." "Did you recognize the person?" Detective Hayes asked, leaning forward. "Slightly." Alex shook his head. "No, they always wore a hood or kept their face hidden. It's like they were trying to blend in, but I could feel their eyes on me. I don't know who they are, but it's like they know everything about me." The detective nodded thoughtfully. "How long has this been happening?" Alex paused, looking down at his hands. "A few weeks. Maybe longer." The detective turned to me, his gaze sharp. "Has Alex mentioned this before?" I shook my head. "No, this is the first time he's said anything about it. He's kept it to himself." Detective Hayes looked back at Alex, his expression serious. "All right, Alex, we'll start by putting together a report. We'll also need you to tell us more about your routine, where you go, when you go, and any unusual encounters you've had. This may seem like something small, but it's important to document everything." Alex nodded, though I could see how exhausted he was. He was trying to be strong, but the weight of everything was getting to him. I reached over and placed a hand on his arm, offering him a silent promise that we would get through this together. The detective gave us a moment to collect our thoughts before starting to take down the details. As he asked Alex questions, I watched my stepson's face transform from one of fear and uncertainty to one of deep concentration. He was slowly taking back control of the situation, confronting the fear he had been carrying alone for so long. It wasn't easy for him, but with each answer, he seemed to regain a little bit of his strength. Once the report was completed, Detective Hayes stood up and shook our hands. "We'll do everything we can to figure this out. It's good that you came in today. I'll have someone from the surveillance team contact you within the next couple of days to review security footage from some of the places you mentioned. In the meantime, I want you to stay alert, Alex. If you notice anything out of the ordinary, call us immediately." I could see Alex's anxiety still lingering, but there was a slight sense of relief in his posture, a subtle easing of his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he seemed to feel like he wasn't alone in this fight. As we left the station, the weight of the situation began to settle in. The steps we had taken felt like the right ones, but they were only the beginning. Whatever was going on with Alex, whatever was happening in the shadows of his life, we had only just scratched the surface. We climbed into the car, and the rain had finally stopped, leaving the world outside looking eerily still. I glanced over at Alex, his face still pale but his eyes more focused. We were in this together now. Whatever was coming, we would face it as a family. But even as I reassured him, a nagging feeling tugged at the back of my mind. There was something about this situation that didn't add up. Someone had been following Alex for weeks, yet we still had no answers. No one could explain why. And, in the pit of my stomach, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much darker, something that had only just started to reveal its true nature. The storm may have passed, but the darkness was far from over.